Welcome to the A Paratrooper and a Yogi Walk Into a Bar podcast. I just walked into this bar and there he is, the Sultan of Statistics, Andrew Fox. And that's Mr. Andrew Fox on Substack and X.
And once again, I'm here to toast my good friend Shana Meyerson, who's sat there in LA, ready for a day of bending herself into a pretzel in the pursuit of yoga perfection. And of course, she is the host of the Yoga of War podcast, which you can find on YouTube. And I'm going to start tonight just very briefly by thanking Shana's mum, who has given me the most beautiful and touching present through a donation to a charity that's very close to me, very close to my heart, for PTSD. So, Shana's mum, thank you so much. I'm touched beyond words and I'm really grateful. So, thank you. And with that important part of the podcast out of the way, Shana, you're up first tonight. What are you going to be talking about?
Well, first, on behalf of Shauna's mom, I could just tell you she'll be like crying and going on about how wonderful you are and thank you. And she just loves you. It was her absolute pleasure. So anyway, greetings from La La Land, home of the Antifa Intifada. So today I want to talk about GretAID, her ship of fools, and what they say about society. Spoiler alert, it's nothing good. These hypocritical social media whores represent everything that the woke cataclysm so lovingly embraces. The destruction of Israel, the destruction of the Jews, and the destruction of Western civilization. Let's be honest. Greta, I don't even know how to say her last name, Thunberg,
That'll do.
her entire, is that pretty good?
Yeah, I think that works.
Okay, well, it works. I don't know if it's actually how it's pronounced, but I'm pretty sure it works. And she doesn't need a last name. I hate it when people who don't deserve to have like a one name get a one name because I could just call her Greta and forget the mispronounced last name, and people would still know who she is. Why? Because her entire life has been one giant publicity stunt, and now that she's a grown-up of sorts, at least. I mean, she's old enough to sip margaritas on her Mediterranean pleasure cruise. Like any child star, she was wilting under the crushing blow of fading glory. And the obvious solution was to glom onto the hottest, coolest trend, drowning the internet like a tidal wave, and then just sail that wave back into the international spotlight. Thank God for terrorism and Jew hatred. They're like the Reese's peanut butter cup of social justice. Wait, do you have Reese's peanut butter cups in the UK?
No, we don't. For British viewers, that is a horrible, over-sweetened American peanut flavored confectionery. Don't try it. It's ghastly.
Okay, I don't think that's far from my description of her. Um, but the
How
old
dare you?
I, I did it. I dared. Oh my God. That was very good. You even got the accent sort of. But back in the 70s or 80s, yes, I'm that old, the slogan for Reese's peanut butter cups was two great tastes that taste great together. And these days that's terror and Jew hatred. Who doesn't love that sandwich? I'm sorry that you hate Reese's. The funny thing is I used to love Reese's so much before I was a vegan. And I posted about them so much that wherever I taught all over the country, people would have Reese's peanut butter cups waiting for me. So just a side note. Anyway, back to the one named Greta. Of course, Greta was going to join this orgy of human rights that happens to go against everything she claims to believe in. Never mind that Israeli ideals like equal rights, like freedom of speech and religion, and a thriving and celebrated LGBTQ community. Israel also happens to be a leader in water tech, agricultural tech, and climate tech. But apparently, those causes are no longer sexy enough to keep Greta basked in the glory she so desperately craves. I mean, I'm sure you have, but have you seen her shrieking on the internet about the Jews like a PR mouthpiece for the Nazi Hitler youth? I mean, she looks drunk on the rapture. I mean, literally drunk. Of course, that picture of her on the ship with the margarita leads me to believe that maybe she was literally drunk. I don't really know, but let's be honest. There's nothing about this party cruise that was ever pro-Palestinian. It was a virtue signaling yacht fueled on blood libels against the Jews and nothing more. Oh, by the way, fun fact. Israel actually asked the UK to block the flotilla. I don't know if one boat counts as a flotilla, but they call it that, so I'll just call
Maybe
it a
it's,
flotilla.
if we go to Spanish etymology, it's a flotillo, singular.
Oh, see,
But
I can't pronounce
flotilla,
anything.
flotilla,
Flotilla, fit
flotilla.
tortilla, flotilla. But the UK actually refused. So yay for the UK. If there was ever any doubt where labor loyalties stand, I don't have to finish that sentence. There was never any doubt, so never mind. Anyway, let's consider the timing of this aid ship. In the wake of 11 million meals that were provided to the people of Gaza by the joint US Israel Gaza Humanitarian Foundation this past week, this marked the first time that people of Gaza have actually received free food instead of the 1.33 million tons of food aid that were previously delivered, hijacked by the good guys of Hamas, read UNRWA, and then sold back to their own people at a premium. If Greta truly cared about the people of Gaza, she would support GHF instead of doubling down on the lies that Israel is starving the strip. Truth is, like most of the sheeple out there, Greta knows nothing about Israel, nothing about Gaza, nothing about the history of this conflict. And quite frankly, she doesn't care to know because, as is the trend on the internet today, facts are just inconvenient nuisances. Like, maybe someone should tell the peaceful freedom flotilla that the thousands of Israelis who Hamas massacred, raped, beheaded, terrorized, dismembered, tortured, burned alive, and kidnapped on 10/7 were predominantly peace activists. Like real life peace activists, the kind that actually call for and do things to promote peace. So Greta proves herself not just to be a useful idiot, but honestly, a total idiot by stealing a page straight out of the Mavi Marmara playbook, which was the Turkish flotilla in, what was it, 2010,
Yeah,
2014?
off the top of my head.
Yeah, she really did think this was a game she couldn't lose. And I have to be honest, I did too. The IntiFLOTILLA would provide the IDF, I'm sorry, not provide, provoke the IDF and basically paint them into a diplomatic corner where Israel would either let them break the blockade and thereby cede control over the waterways, or they would block the Jihadi Justice Brigade and create an international outrage. The revolution is being televised. Now, Greta, knowing full well that she would be arrested, pre-recorded a video which, in a sick and perverted attempt to subvert the very real crisis of the 55 remaining hostages in Gaza, claims she's been kidnapped by Israel and all international pressure must be made to release her. Then what happens? France calls for the immediate release of the yacht rockers, and Spain summons its Israeli ambassador. Oh, by the way, why Israel still has an ambassador in Spain is way beyond me at this point. But okay. So never mind that even though Israel is not legally obligated to free them, their policy with all sea creatures has always been one of catch and release. France and Spain had to play their role as obedient virtue signalers and get in that diplomatic dig against the Jewish state.
I mean, the French could
Greta.
have always said, could have just called it the Rainbow Warrior. I mean, they don't, the French don't really have a leg to stand on when it comes to sinking ships in other waters, do they? Remember that the Greenpeace ship that the French sunk in New Zealand?
Well, but there were no Jews, so why would I remember?
Yeah, fair, fair. No G's, no G's.
I always seek to be fair in my analysis here.
But yeah, it's hypocrisy from the French, isn't it? Absolute hypocrisy.
Well, I mean, I could argue that we've had 20 months of hypocrisy from most of the free world. Forget about the non-free world. It's not even hypocrisy. They just say what they mean and they mean what they say. But what's going on in the free world, I don't even know anymore. This whole concept of Greta as a hostage. So I guess my first question would be like, how stupid can people really be?
Very.
Because they buy into this stuff. I'm trying really hard to keep my mouth clean. I don't know why. We're in a bar. But my second question is, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, how has humanity survived this long when it's so freaking stupid? I had to keep it clean, but you can fill in the blank on the freaking part. I just don't get it. So last night, the Greta gang surrendered, and the IDF treated them like the simpering infants that they are, using kid gloves to tide them over with a nice little sandwich and water, which they gladly accepted. I guess the Uber Eats of the high seas realized if they keep making their yacht party spreads out of their aid to Gaza, there would be no hummus left for Hamas. But Israel did promise to pass along the scraps of what was left on the flotilla to the poor people of Gaza. And that's going to feed like a whole family for a full, not at all. So what now? To be honest, this shouldn't even be a discussion. And I absolutely hate that I'm wasting my breath and our time talking about this transparent spectacle at all. And it's a disgrace that the IDF should be held captive to this brat's social media grab. Greta and her comrades should be treated exactly like anyone else who breaks maritime law and anyone else who provides or aims to provide material support for terrorists. Otherwise, it's just going to encourage more and more captain's chair jihadis to follow suit by sea, by air, or by land. The nautical narcissists should be arrested and tried for criminal offenses, and they should pay the price for their actions. They won't. But it does seem that Israel did accomplish the seemingly impossible and put the Queen into a PR checkmate for probably the first, as I see it, PR win of this entire war by forcing Greta to watch the 49-minute Hamas snuff film. She's going to have three choices. One, say nothing. And sometimes silence speaks louder than words. Let's be honest. Number two, say she supports it, which reveals what a sick little terrorist she really is. Or three, say the truth, that what Hamas did on 10/7 was an affront to all humanity, and Israel is just in its existential war on terror. Well, as of last check, Greta has deleted every X post all the way back to February. Yeah, it happens to be a post of her cozying up to noted anti-Semite Francesca Albanese, but at least it's a start, and maybe even the start of the end. The end.
The ends. Well, not really, because now it's my turn, even though I've
The end
briefly
for me, I
interrupted you
mean.
repeatedly. Well, there's two other options for that video, I think. I think option one is she goes, yeah, that's terrible, but it doesn't justify what you're doing in Gaza, which I think is probably the most likely outcome. Or option two, given the company she's keeping, one of the gentlemen on that boat was at Nasrallah's funeral, and it's been videoed shouting "Death to America, death to Israel, death to the West." The extreme option would be to deny it and say this is fake Israeli Hezbollah propaganda, which, let's face it, is not an uncommon narrative amongst people that lean towards supporting Greta's position. The amount of times you hear people talking about Hannibal directives and all that bullshit, and then Israeli Apaches, and that's a common narrative out there in the world. So she might
Have
like
we
that
heard that
extreme
from
option.
people who have we heard that from people who have actually seen the full film?
I don't know. It's a good question. It's a good question, but we'll see. Um, but the that speaks, I think, to a slightly wider picture here when we talk about the amount of disinformation that's out there about this war. And if you want a really good example, go on the Rusi website because they just posted, frankly, reputationally catastrophic nonsense about. It's a run through of the greatest hits of anti-Israel hit pieces that have happened over the last 20 months, pulled together into one document. It's really, really poor, especially from the Royal United Services Institute, which has got a pretty good reputation. It's a staggering fail by their editorial team. But it speaks again to this wider ecosystem of propaganda that swirls around this war, and the narrative is owned by the propaganda. And Greta is almost the apotheosis of that. It's the high watermark of bullshit. We've got essentially, TikTok and Instagram and X and all these other various social media apps proliferating around the world that share these lies faster than the truth could ever dream of responding. It's fueled by Muslim Brotherhood money. It's fueled by Iran and Russia and amplified by China and Pakistan. And I think we need to look at this war in the round. And when the dust settles, I think people will start to come to this conclusion that actually these social media platforms are starting to represent an existential threat to how our societies operate. We're in a post-truth world where anyone can post anything and people will believe it. And people will even sail in a yacht to Gaza. Such is the strength of the disinformation that's out there. I mean, look at, they're bringing aid to Gaza because there's starvation. Okay, bollocks. There have been more calories per day going into Gaza than before the war, and more than enough calories per day for every person in Gaza not to go hungry. So if we know for a fact by the UN's own figures that that is true, how are people going hungry? Because, I'm on Gazan Telegram groups. There are undoubtedly people saying that they haven't had enough food. And the reason for that is Hamas, and they've deleted themselves from the entire conversation. But we can't just leave it there and say it's Hamas's fault. What has the UN been doing? What are all these NGOs who are endlessly hammering Israel? What have they been doing with their food supplies for the last 20 months? And yes, you can say that Israel shouldn't have cut off the aid for a month. You can make that case, and I'm sympathetic to it. I don't wholly agree, but if we know people were going to go hungry, then it's a conversation that we can have as honest interlocutors. But we also know that during that ceasefire, enough food for 6 months went into Gaza. So again, if you then cut that aid and people are then going hungry, we know the food's in there. We've always known it's in there. It's no different. And actually, there's more food in there after the ceasefire during the cut-off of aid than at any point during the war. And so, again, Hamas given a completely free pass, the UN a free pass, NGOs who are their sole raison d'etre are to distribute food, gets a free pass, and it comes back on Israel every time. And yeah, and that's where we end up. We end up with Greta in a boat getting given a sandwich by someone from Shire Tech 13. And Shaitek 13 is the Israeli Navy SEALs. Shaitek means flotilla, I believe. Is it not? Flotilla 13. So the Flotilla
If you
13.
think that my Hebrew is good enough to know the word flotilla in Hebrew, I have the Hebrew proficiency of like a 1.5-year-old.
Okay.
Maybe 1 3/4.
Anyway, enough of that. Yalla. The uh yeah, so the flotilla met 13 met the flotilla Greta. And we can talk a very little bit about the military perspective on that, just as a sidebar, because there's a
Yeah.
lot of talk about the white substance that was on the boat. Now, I spoke to a friend of mine who served with the Special Boat Service, which is our Navy SEALs in the UK, except they're proper tier one, so they're SEAL Team 6 rather than your bog standard Navy SEALs. And he was saying that it's actually standard practice in such kinds of interdictions to spray the vessel with something like smart water, like you get on banknotes for bank raids, because it kind of marks everyone on the boat. It goes on their clothes, so you can see definitively and prove that, for legal chains of evidence, you can prove that the people were on the boat, and it also marks up the boat in case it tries to get away. So it's a standard practice in these kinds of things. And I would suggest that that's what this was as well. There's a suggestion that maybe it was skunk water, but I don't think that's the really stinking water that the Israelis spray on rioters. I don't think we've seen enough reports of the symptoms of that, or people reacting to it in the way you'd expect. Some people were suggesting it was white phosphorus, which is just ridiculous because the boat would be on fire if they'd use white phosphorus. So that is a nonsense. We can debunk that myth straight away. So the most likely thing it was, and I'm not saying categorically that it was, but the most likely thing is that smart water, which marks the vessel for essentially legal and tracing purposes. But there we are. We live in this weird disinformation environment, and I'm sure give it a 24 hours and that will have been some kind of chemical weapon used against Greta. And that's the line that the world will believe, such is the insanity of the times in which we live. Um, and yeah, the final point is they're encouraging other people to repeat the flotilla's staggering success. Um, First of all, the obvious problem is money. Um, these things aren't cheap. It's not, there's a reason that it's millionaires who go on holidays in yachts in the Mediterranean and not ordinary people on the street. And Greta, of course, because she's just an ordinary person. And there's definitely no sinister dark money behind her at all. No, absolutely not. Um, it's very expensive. And, if someone wants to repeat this, then it will just happen again, and Israel will apprehend them, show them the 7th of October video, then release them, I should imagine. So it's a futile, stupid, pointless, childish, ignorant, and pathetic incident. But at the end of the day, it's given us all a really good laugh in the middle of a really unpleasant and sad war. So I think in many ways we should thank Greta for the chuckles. Thank you for the laughs, you absolute buffoon. There you go. That's my bit.
Actually, may I ask you a question as a war expert?
Hmm.
I'm not the war expert. I think that might have confused some people.
Yeah, you're the
Um,
bendy expert.
that's right. Just to reiterate, I'm the yogi. He's the paratrooper. I write that at the beginning of all the videos at the bottom, but maybe I should keep it the whole time in case people get confused. But my question is, can you speak a little bit to the actual rules of war and maritime law as they apply to trying to break a military blockade the way that they did?
Do you know what? You've embarrassed me because I can't. Look, I was in the army.
Oh,
We
okay.
don't, we don't even go near water to wash, never mind to float around on top of and interdict all kinds of awful people. So, um, I'm really not your man, but I have people we can ask, and what I'll do is
Okay.
I'll dig it out because my good friend Chris is a retired admiral. I'll drop him a line and I'll drop it in the replies to this and clarify the matter.
Oh, perfect. But you are my man. You are my, believe me, whatever you know about it, whatever I know about, I know from Chat GPT. And it does say that what it did say, and I formulated the question a lot of different ways that um, some said it's an act of war, but because they're not a state actor, I assume it's not an act of war, but it
Right.
does make them a legitimate military target, which is interesting because when I hear those words, I hear hospitals in Gaza. And we
And you
should know.
just got our podcast banned.
I should note that just what was it yesterday or the day before, Mohammed Sinwar's body was recovered from beneath the European hospital, if there ever was any doubt. And the photo of the hospital showing the tunnel that was destroyed from in front, you could see that the hospital itself actually wasn't even touched in this mission, which goes against every social media narrative ever. But just let me just make one note again about what you're saying about social media. I do believe that, I've been saying this for a long time, that social media is going to be the end of Western civilization. Among other things, that because we're being really, for the most part, shoved into echo chambers, which are comforting and soothing and cocoony, but at the same time, what it's doing is creating a mass polarization. And what used to be the 80-20 rule, I keep arguing, is probably like a 20-80 rule now, that everyone's being pushed into their corners. And I think there's very few left in the middle who are willing to be rational and find common ground with the people who may disagree with all or some of what they believe. And unfortunately, I don't see social media going anywhere. And I do want to say that in January, I did a Yoga War podcast with David Bernstein, who wrote this book, Woke Antisemitism. And my premise was that the goal of this whole war from the start was never to destroy Israel. It was to normalize anti-Semitism and destroy the Jewish people. And that is playing out in if you looked at what happened during the ceasefire, there were more calls for intifada, more calls for jihad, instead of like, let's continue the peace. And I know it sounds like a bit of a side note, but this is one of the dots that I cannot stop connecting. That I believe that when this war ends, the social media narrative against the Jews is just going to continue to ramp up and up and up. And this is a delegitimization campaign. It's working. It's sad. And what starts with the Jews never ends with the Jews.
There you go. A really uplifting note to finish on, but no, I think you're right, and it's scary times. But we'll just keep telling the truth as we see it, and hopefully some people will listen.
Yeah,
If you
I was
did
thinking,
listen, sorry, go on.
no, go ahead.
I was going to say, if people did listen all the way to the end, then please do subscribe and like and leave a comment below. Would be my humble request to you to help us build this up into something cool.
Absolutely. And please click the bell for notifications so you never miss an episode and have no excuse for ever missing one of these fascinating, scintillating, and incredibly uplifting episodes.
Anyway, cheers to that.
L'chaim. I'll see you next week.